All right. Welcome back, everyone. So, some interesting stuff to go into. I'm sure a lot of you are interested in Sidney Powell. Yeah, a lot of you talking about that. So, a couple important things on this. First off, Sidney Powell was never technically on the Trump team. Of course, she did some big events with them, a little more complicated. She also announced she's still going to be running her own legal push alongside the Trump team, just not directly with it. I have some interesting stuff to tell you all on this. Actually, I think you're going to find it very interesting. That said, so for today's show, I'm going to go first into this a bit. Then I'm going to go over an analysis that we have put together with Epoch Times. Then I'll go into some of the questions. Now, all right, I'm going to put something together for you all. So hear me out. So this is New York Times today, all right? New York Times says Trump team disavows lawyer who peddled conspiracy theories on voting. President Trump's campaign issued a striking repudiation of Sidney Powell, who had offered up widely derided conspiracy theories as she tried to aid the president's baseless challenges to vote counts. Yeah, no bias there, right? All right. Now listen to this, right? So this is from the article. Miss Powell, who was described as a member of the legal team's elite strike force at the news conference on Thursday, as she laid out an elaborate conspiracy theory about efforts by the former Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez, who died in 2013, to essentially rig elections in the United States by using voting machines made by Dominion voting systems. And it says, while Mr. Trump has become obsessed with the idea of global conspiracy, cybersecurity officials from his own government have said there's no evidence that machines were compromised. So was Hugo Chavez tied to these machines? All right, I'm going to read you guys a story real quick and then try to guess what the source is for this, okay? All right, here's what it says. It says intellectual property of voting machines, of voting systems still owned by firm linked to Venezuelan president despite press statement to the contrary. All right, hear me out. All right, hear me out. I'm going to read you the article, then I'll give you the source on it, all right? It says this. As part of the detailed investigative expose series in 2008, as we broke the story of Hart and Cervik's quietly attempted hostile takeover of Sequoia, we revealed the fact that despite representation to the contrary, possibly even to U.S. government investigators, the IP, the intellectual property, for the vast majority, near entirety of Sequoia's voting systems was actually secretly owned by Hugo Chavez-tied Venezuelan-based firm Smartmatic. Guess who acquired Smartmatic? Right? That was Dominion. Now, let me continue on this, and then I'll give you the source of what this is, all right? It says the continuing control of the IP, the intellectual property, was discovered by Brad Blog long after the largely right-wing outrage, which had forced a federal investigation to Smartmatic's control over American elections had died down. The initial concern had come following revelations that Smartmatic seemed to be directly tied to the Venezuelan president, Hugo Chavez. Venezuelan President Chavez. Angry sentiment led by CNN's Lou Dobbs and some members of Congress, including New York Democratic Representative Carolyn Maloney, led to an investigation by the Federal Commission on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, subsequently forcing Smartmatic to divest in Sequoia. Sequoia was then supposedly purchased away from Smartmatic by a team of its U.S. executives in order to make it fully independent from the Chavez-tied parent company. But that divestiture was a lie. Sequoia hadn't publicly disclosed that Smartmatic still retained legal ownership of the IP used in all of their voting machines, a fact that wasn't publicly revealed until her expose, which forced the subsequent admission by Sequoia, then CEO and president, Jack Blaine. Blaine admitted in what he thought was a confidential company-wide conference call convened to explain the attempted Hart takeover to employees, so on, that the company hadn't actually acquired the IP from Smartmatic in the deal. Meaning, it meant, of course, that Hugo Chavez basically maintained control of that. Now, what's this story? This is from 2017. This is from 2017 in the Huffington Post. I'll send you all the link here in the chat. Right, you all can have a look yourself. You might enjoy it. And here's the title on that 2017 Huffington Post. On heels of Diebold Premier purchase, Canadian e-voting firm Dominion also acquires Sequoia. Lies about Chavez ties in announcement. Now that same tie through Sequoia, right? Again through this company to Dominion. This is what's going on right here. This is what New York Times right now is saying is a conspiracy theory when it's been written about plenty in the past. 2017, 2018, a lot of articles on it. And now an interesting point on this as well. Now, Sequoia and these systems also had a very bad reputation in Venezuela and in Latin America. Many countries, Bolivia, Venezuela, they had issues with it, as well with Brazil. Let me read you another story here. All right. Give me one sec. All right. I'll tell you this one straight up. This is from The Guardian in 2017. It says this: Venezuela poll turnout figures manipulated by at least 1 million votes. Election company Smartmatic cast doubt on outcome of vote for Constituent Assembly to write a new constitution. Again, Smartmatic, the company tied to Sequoia, intellectual property tied to Hugo Chavez, again, acquired all of this into Dominion, and Venezuela maintained control over that intellectual property. All right, but this is all conspiracy, right? So it's all conspiracy. I have today Taiwanese mountain tea, and you can join me for some tea while we go over this. Now, let me go over this Guardian article just a bit. Again, this is 2017. It says this, and I'll send you the link in the chat. Turnout figures in Venezuela's Constituent Assembly election were inflated by at least 1 million votes, according to a company that has worked with the country on its voting system since 2004. It says this, quote, "We know without any doubt that the turnout of the recent election for a national constituent assembly was manipulated." It's according to Antonio Mujica, the chief executive of Smartmatic. And it says this, Mujica said Smartmatic, which has provided electronic voting technology for elections around the world, was able to detect the overstated officially announced turnout because of Venezuela's automated election system. And he said this, quote, "We estimate the difference between the actual participation and the one announced by authorities is at least 1 million votes." Nothing to see here, folks. Here, I'll send you all the link to this in the chat. Sending now. All right. Now, that said, I'm going to go into a bit of the deeper analysis for today. And folks, really appreciate the donations also. Very much so. Hey, Heck293, aloha, good to see you. Thank you. Everyone, glad to have you here. Thank you. Now, let me go. So again, I'm gonna go over now some analysis we put together at Epoch Times. From there, we're going to go into the Q&A. So stick around for that. But let me go over some analysis first. All right. Now, there's a current event that is very important. Of course, this happened yesterday. I'm sorry. That really we should address. Again, the three most prominent members that were tied to Trump's legal team. Of course, Sidney Powell's not really with them now. They appeared in a press conference to explain many of the important issues of the last 2 weeks since the November 3rd elections. Now, because of the seriousness of this information, the imbalance of this, many important facts have been covered up and misinterpreted. A lot of media misrepresented the facts on this stuff. And this is a very important truth to pay attention when we look at these stories. If we don't make it clear, right? This is one issue you have. If you don't set the record straight of what was actually said, if you don't set the record straight of what was actually discussed, and you let these false stories work as basically the basis of history, then when people look back at these issues, they base their interpretation of it on the false stories. Again, which almost all the big media are pushing right now. Hey, CP23 Pittman, thank you for the donation. saying, "I've heard since she is a lawyer for the militaries, she can't file on the basis of treason, but in doing so, she can't be connected to the Trump campaign." That's actually interesting. It is true. Powell is, from what I understand, tied to the military, and so that would make sense actually. Not everything is as simple as what you see on the surface. There might be something more to it that we're not being told. NKSB, thank you for the donation. Now let's jump into what actually was said at these press conferences and why it matters. Now, hey, JU, thank you. Now, among those who appeared at the press conference were Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's attorney, his personal attorney, Sidney Powell as well. Now, Sidney Powell, who has been speaking out a lot these days, really. She's not technically part of the legal team. They made that clear in this new announcement. She wasn't part of it before, but she was working very closely with the Trump team on this. Now, she's been speaking out a lot these days. She was an attorney tied to them, of course, and she's considered, at least was, one of the three main pillars of the Trump legal team, the other one being Jenna Ellis, who's a senior counsel to Trump's campaign. Now, it was a long press conference they gave, over 3 hours with a lot of specific details. We're going to pick out some of the most important details that were gone over in this, particularly some of them that need some clarifying and, really to eliminate some of the misunderstandings that people have been spreading about this. The first thing is that a lot of people are saying that the Trump team has no evidence, right? I'm sure you've heard, even that New York Times story I showed you guys, they say in there that, there's no evidence in this stuff, right? Now, the Trump team is just spreading lies and rumors without evidence, right? That's the allegation. So Attorney Giuliani is dedicated to clarifying this issue. Hamster dance, I appreciate it. Sorry, I get some background noise in my building. Now, in the state of Michigan alone, Attorney Giuliani said that he has prepared as many as 220 witness testimonies, and that sworn testimonies constitute evidence in the law. In other words, 220 witness testimonies which constitute evidence. They do have evidence. You can question the validity of that evidence. You can say you disagree with it, but you can't say there's no evidence. And now the mainstream media is repeating that the Trump team has no evidence, which is technically a lie. They're lying to you. I think it's important to clarify this issue. The second problem is that it's not raining, but thundering, right? There's a lot going on right now. It's the same with Trump supporters, right? Being labeled as spreading rumors, right? Having no decent actions. Attorney Giuliani also clarified this issue. That is to say, the average person has no idea how much preparation goes into filing a lawsuit. Even if it's a simple case, you have to prepare materials for at least 1 day. Right? It takes time for these things. Not to mention the huge amount of witness testimony collected during this time. They have a lot of witness testimony. Cornell Galfantiu, thank you. What are your thoughts? Will Trump win? Let me get into that. I'm pretty confident. I am pretty confident he will win, to be honest, but we'll have to see. It is kind of dancing on the edge of a knife right now. Let me go deeper into this, though. Right. It takes time to do these things, and they're not going to release all their evidence straight out, although they have evidence. Right. Even the witness testimony is considered evidence. Now, it's not as if Trump's team is just spreading rumors and able to propose any legal action and waiting for the momentum to pass and Biden to move into the White House. That's not what's happening. Many of the reporters covering the story, covering that big event, ignored the legal process. Now, we don't know if they're really ignorant or pretending to be ignorant, right? It doesn't seem like, the reporters are trying. It seems like these reporters are basically trying to run the case, is what's happening, right? And again, people are getting disappointed because it's not moving as fast as they'd like it to move. Then there are some people who say that Trump's lawsuits are just running up against the wall everywhere. He's lost many, many cases, so on. I read a story, for example, making some pretty outrageous claims that he had won one of his 27 lawsuits and lost all 26. The other 26. Attorney Giuliani was able to clarify that some of these cases were brought by individuals, not by the Trump campaign directly. In other words, the ones that got thrown out were not technically, or dropped, were not technically with the Trump campaign. A lot of misinterpretations, a lot of false information being spread by the big media. Now, Again, like certain Republicans in certain states raising cases that are not brought by Trump's team, right? These are Republicans in different states making their own legal challenges, losing them or dropping them. Those were not Trump team. Those were not from the Trump team, right? Now, and since there are dozens of cases going on at all levels, it takes some time to go over this. I won't go over all of them here. But, based on what we're seeing, right, based on the reporting we're doing here, it's true that in at least some cases, the mainstream media is deliberately distorting the story to promote Trump's failures, to make it look like Trump is failing. They're deliberately misleading people in order to frame the narrative they want. The Washington Post, for example, says that Trump's team dropped the lawsuit in Pennsylvania over the allegations that these scrutineers, people watching the polls, were prevented from doing their jobs, as well as a large number of absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, and a lack of transparency of being able to have people doing poll watching, saying they were shady, withdrawn, and would not pursue the lawsuit, which is clearly a distortion of the facts. Now, several members of Trump's legal team have already tweeted out their refuting these claims, saying that the appeals are still included in the paragraphs of the indictment. They deliberately didn't bother to read them, meaning that the reporters putting around these false narratives, they're not even considering the facts. They're not even telling people the facts. They're misleading people, just going on with this, right? Now, going a bit into this more. Now, again, these media, they're making big points, right? And when they're fabricating these things, getting amplified by this whole big media machine, really millions of people see through it right away. Again, it kind of backfires on them. You can only see it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And only a few thousand or most of a few tens of thousands of people will see it, right? You're not going to have the facts being viewed by the majority of the public, because who's talking about it these days? Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, if they don't censor you, and people talking one-on-one. How can you even get accurate depictions of the news unless you go watch the sources yourself? And then even on top of that, a lot of news outlets, for example, during Trump campaign speeches, legal challenges, a lot of them don't even fully broadcast it. How can the people actually figure out what's going on with this? If they're being censored, if media are refusing to cover it, if there's no way of getting it. Now, another statement that's going around is that, Trump is like rats leaving a ship, that, you have people fleeing, there's all kinds of chaos and stuff like this going on. A lot of misinterpretations, a lot of misinformation. Now, they said there are lawyers pulling out, the momentum is gone, so those Trump fans, are getting excited, but it's just a fantasy. New York Times, a story I mentioned earlier, pretty much said this. In response to that question, Attorney Giuliani is saying that some attorneys did pull out, but not because they lost confidence in the case, but because they were intimidated by threats. There were threats from the community, from people, as well as the professional world, against them. They're being threatened, and they withdrew because of the threats. Now, going a bit more into this, let me get some tea. Now, imagine you're a lawyer, right? You're working for Trump. Why do you take on the case? Now, do you want to keep your job afterwards? What is the benefit of staying on? People willing to take that amount of flack, it takes a certain type of character to be willing to want to represent Trump when the entire world, it seems, is against him in some way. It takes a lot of guts, especially when people are literally being openly threatened. People are being openly threatened for supporting him, for defending him. Now, I was putting together some interesting information on this, because one of the big allegations, again, is Sequoia and Dominion. Sequoia being tied to Dominion, as you mentioned earlier, it is actually tied to Hugo Chavez. Huffington Post reported it back in 2017, even though it's being called now a conspiracy theory. There were documented cases, including in most of the big mainstream media, 2017, 2018, when the stuff was not considered conspiracy theory, reporting this was taking place. Why did they report all this back in 2017, 2018, and now they're flipping the narrative and saying, if you say what they reported back then, you're a conspiracy theorist? Well, I was thinking about what's going on right now, and there's an interesting and broader picture to the challenges the Trump team is facing. If they delegitimize Dominion, if they delegitimize Sequoia, What does that mean, not just for US elections, but for just about every government in the world that came to power through these systems? You're looking at a very big picture. You're looking at just about every major government power throughout Latin America, Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil. You're looking at, for example, other countries in Europe. You're looking at South Korea. If the elections are delegitimized in the United States on this ground, other countries that have used these exact same systems very likely could also have the same issues. And so maybe this is why these different foreign leaders were coming out of the woodwork and supporting Biden when he declared that he was the winner of the elections, when it clearly wasn't the case. Maybe this is why they're pretending Biden is won. Maybe this is why they're manipulating their news. Maybe this is why they're censoring people. Because if this is overturned in the United States, this isn't just a US issue. This is a global issue. If this is resolved in the United States, this is going to affect every single government that came to power through these exact same systems, and there are a lot of them. Dominion is involved in elections in a lot of countries, not just the United States. Not just Dominion, but Sequoia as well. These technologies that were used to change the face of international politics. If the Trump team actually does have the evidence they claim they have, including, for example, saying they have the, that they have the algorithm used to alter votes, that's going to be a big deal. This will change to some extent. We'll have to see to what extent. It could significantly change the international political layout. It could delegitimize elections in many, many countries around the world based on the exact same evidence coming out in the US right now. In other words, this is not a Trump versus Democrats issue. This is not even a conservative versus liberal issue or a, Trump and Biden issue. This is an issue of extreme far left governments and the free world. This is an issue of freedom and socialism, as I often say it. And this is also an issue of corruption, corrupt officials, corrupt businesses, corrupt institutions in every part of the world that have been working together on programs like this that are now being exposed. And maybe this is why everything is being censored here. Maybe this is why Twitter is marking things as fake news, why Facebook is getting on it, why the media is all trying to play along in this big lie, trying to claim everything's over, Biden won, move on with your life, lock yourself in your home, citizen, because it's all over, right? That's the narrative right now. Maybe this is why we're seeing what we're seeing. Because what's happening right now, if the world is made aware of it, if it can be legally resolved, if Trump wins, this is not just a U.S. issue. This is going to be big. Now, let's go on with the analysis. Now, again, what's this fraud case and how big is the scope? Trump's legal team is saying it's national, right? I'd say international, right? And as far as the evidence has been concentrated in a few swing states, which Attorney Giuliani concludes are mainly in big corrupt cities that have been under Democrat Party control for a long time. And the evidence they have is that they're confident of overturning the results in states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Virginia. There is also a lot of evidence for this. And again, if they can present accurate evidence on this, it could flip more states than Trump needs, many more states than he needs. In other words, could be a Trump landslide if, when the smoke clears of these legal challenges. And again, the domino effect you're going to see very likely around the world. Everyone, really appreciate the donation. Let's see here. We have the great douchebag. Good to see you again, man. Thank you. George Soros demands a receipt from a drug dealer. And he is tied to it. George Soros is tied to these things. Actually, that they say it's a conspiracy theory. There are ties to him, whether people like it or not. Curry Flora, appreciate the donation. Why are Trump's lawyers claiming open fraud with hard evidence to the media, but in court under oath they state they have no evidence of fraud? It's not true. They have the sworn testimonies, which are considered evidence. They have plenty of it actually coming out. The media have just been not telling you what's going on with it, frankly. King Asphalt, appreciate the donation. Thank you. Abel Gonzalez, appreciate the donation. The same thing happened in the 2016 Philippine presidential election. Smartmatic, 8-hour stop during canvassing. Then Duterte elected, winning over 16 million votes over Roxas. That's interesting. Actually, it seems that this pattern repeats in a lot of places. Even in Brazil, Alando Santos, a good friend of mine, with Terce Livre, he said, the same thing happened on Brazil on election night. Everything froze. Look, things were going well. Everything froze, and all the votes started flipping against Bolsonaro. Now, Bolsonaro took some kind of action behind the scenes. Things flipped back around, and he did win in the end. But it looked like Bolsonaro was going to lose for a good bit. And again, same basic pattern, same basic thing happened in Brazil. Shirley, appreciate the donation. Thank you. And Joe Hartman, thank you. What is the truth regarding Sidney Powell? I just turned in. You can. I don't want to go over the whole analysis. You can watch the beginning of this episode where I go over it. Sidney Powell wasn't. Now, so going over it again, just real quick for those of you tuned in late. Sidney Powell, the Trump campaign or the Trump legal team announced that Sidney Powell is not part of the Trump legal team. This is more of a clarification. She was never technically part of it. Yes, they gave press conferences alongside her. Yes, she was doing, speaking to media. She was always technically apart from them. Very likely they're trying to differentiate her legal cases from those of the Trump campaign so they don't, nullify each other, essentially. That's what I assume is happening. Of course, we'll get more information as it comes out, but it was more a clarification of the fact that she wasn't technically part of the legal team. Dick Chisco, appreciate the donation. Dick Chisco in the house. Trump 2020, Pompeo 2024. Soros is evil. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. Mitchell Smith, appreciate the donation. Soros is wanted in his home country of Hungary for election manipulation. Soros says. It's interesting. You can't talk about him on a lot of the mainstream media, but you want to read a good book. Read The Shadow Party by David Horowitz. It was written before any of this was considered conspiracy theory or controversial. It goes over how Soros essentially bought control of the Democratic Party and how he got rich collapsing currencies in different parts of the world. He's done it many, many times. Collapsing currencies, buying up the assets once he collapses the currencies. Some dirty business. An interesting fact as well, the Chinese Communist Party built its financial warfare systems based on the Soros model. If you read the book, it's written by two Chinese colonels at the time. They went on to become much higher rank. It's called Unrestricted Warfare. Do a text search for Soros. They call Soros a financial terrorist, and they analyze his method of collapsing currencies and buying up assets. And they model their own economic warfare systems based on the Soros model. The Chinese Communist Party uses it. Larry Hank, appreciate the donation. Thanks for helping me understand what is going on. Hey, my pleasure. Thank you. Let's see here. Mr. J Blonde 2012. What is your feeling on the Dominion representatives lawyering up and not showing up for court in Philadelphia? They're deleting their LinkedIn accounts. They're deleting their social media accounts. That Sequoia and these other systems. There's an internet scrub going on. It seems to be the case that they're keeping a low profile. Maybe they realize something more is happening right now, and maybe they're afraid of something. Just being honest. I think again, the funny thing with Dominion is it's considered a right-wing conspiracy thing right now. 2017, 2016, a lot of the leftist media were saying the same thing. I read for you earlier in this episode, and I put the link in of Huffington Post talking about Dominion buying up Sequoia, buying up Smartmatic, and noting that Dominion lied about the fact that Hugo Chavez retained the intellectual property, at least the group's tied to Hugo Chavez because he was dead at the time. Hugo Chavez retained the intellectual property for Smartmatic, meaning that Dominion had the system, Smartmatic, and Venezuela still had control over parts of it. Why was that not stated, right? Why is this called conspiracy theory now? Huffington Post reported it back in 2017. I put the link in for you all. I mean, bizarre stuff. This is called conspiracy theory. These media were reporting the same thing. Let's see here. 1 second. Losing track of the everyone coming in. All right, this is from Anaf Habib. I appreciate the donation. U.S. versus Throckmorton, 1876. Quote, fraud vitiates everything. The lefty meltdown to the total victory of Trump will be biblical. Bunker down, folks. The Democratic terrorists will mass mobilize across the nation. I did see someone mention that 1876 case, and I need to look into it. I'm going to actually take note of it. 1 sec. Yeah. I appreciate the lead on that. I remember seeing people mentioning it. This is from APAP. I appreciate the donation. As a libertarian, I'm hoping that the Trump team has evidence that they do. I'm still waiting for a judge to take up a case that will overturn this election. If not, this makes him seem a sore loser. Time will tell. Again, they have a lot. They have evidence of dead people voting. They do have that. They have, for example, the death certificates. Now, the funny thing is that big media, they report pretty much lies on this. They'll be like, "Oh, they said I was dead. I'm right here." They'll interview like one old lady on this or something like that. There's a lot of disinformation going on. Yes, they have found significant evidence, which I've had people send some stuff to me. They do have evidence of dead people voting. Now, is it enough to overturn the election by itself? Maybe not. But here's the issue. You have not just one form of fraud taking place. This isn't just the mail-in ballots. This isn't just changes made to election laws in different states that went around legal norms. This wasn't just dead people voting. This wasn't just, Dominion and Sequoia and their foreign ties. This wasn't just the fact that some of the software being used or some of the hardware being used in these systems comes from China, which, again, Trump administration had an executive order which went into effect before all this, banning Chinese hardware from our supply chains for government use. Meaning, again, many different chains leading to what happened. This isn't just one scandal. This is like 20 different scandals we're looking at, roughly. This is multiple scandals, each of which may not be able to return things on its own, but taken as a whole is a pretty serious picture. And taken as a whole, really, they do have pretty strong cases with it. Let's go over a few of them. How did for example, recounts in Pennsylvania, how did the counts in Pennsylvania keep going after November 3rd? It's because the local government changed the laws allowing votes to be, again, accepted after November 3rd. Made it so they could keep counting votes, for the next week, longer than a week. Meaning that, again, they altered the law. They changed the law in order to allow that to happen. And they changed the law not through the normal legal means. Would a judge overturn that? Probably. What happens if Pennsylvania flips back? That's a serious victory for Trump, because Trump would need Pennsylvania and like one other state. That would be pretty serious. Now, you had other issues, for example, not technically illegal, but scummy. For example, you had lawyers tied to the Democrats, for example, who played a role in altering local laws, making it so that things that would have been normally made, things that would normally be illegal to do were made legal through court rulings. And the way they did it was this. They would file lawsuits against each other. One of them would, basically concede. It would make the judge pass a ruling, and they were able to create new laws or change laws based on this. A real scummy system, a really, conniving system. Is that illegal? We'll have to see. There's a lot of small things like this that were done. There were a lot of big things that were done. Even on top of everything, the fact that if Dominion, going back into this, if Dominion did in fact, through its purchase of Sequoia, through its, Smartmatic, which was tied to Sequoia, which was tied to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, which Dominion lied to the American public back in 2017 about its ties to Hugo Chavez, that the intellectual property was still owned by the group tied to Chavez. meaning that Venezuela would still have influence very likely over that intellectual property. The fact that they lied about that, and the fact that, again, you had a foreign hostile company being involved directly in the system still. Remember Trump's executive order in 2018. What did it say? When Trump signed an executive order on election fraud and declared a national emergency in the United States, which we are still in, what was the basis of that? Foreign governments trying to interfere in our elections. Not just limited to direct interference, but also to, for example, spreading disinformation to damage, America's perceptions of information and of the elections. Remember, the whole Trump-Russia conspiracy was based on that Russia was, putting paid disinformation on Facebook, and this flipped the election, which was, of course, false. Even Facebook came out and said, even Obama had come out and said, had no known effect on the elections. But based on that, because the left made such a stink about it, Trump again put that in his executive order. Now, what happens if it turns out, which it is the fact now, again, Huffington Post reported it in 2017. What happens then if it turns out that these voting systems do have foreign influence in them? What happens if these voting companies have had the same types of anomalies take place in other countries, which we've seen evidence of, which there were reports of, which The Guardian reported on, which big media reported on back in 2017, 2018, 2016, when they were all reporting on this and saying it was the biggest issue in the country. And again, now that they flipped on it and they're saying otherwise. That alone, Trump has a major card he can play through that 2018 executive order. I assume that that's his last straw. I assume that he's not going to move on that to that extent unless he has no other options on his table. I think he's going to try the counts and recounts first. I think he's going to then go for the legal actions. Counts and recounts, he has a pretty good shot at it. Legal options, he has a very good shot at it. The Trump card, the big one he can drop, is the fact that he passed that executive order in 2018, which did in fact declare a national emergency, would let him, for example, seize assets of anyone involved in this, and not just, again, direct interference in elections, but even manipulating public opinion, meaning that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, all the big media, a lot of big billionaires possibly tied to the left, possibly quite a few of them would fall within the definition of the crimes outlined in that 2018 document. And really, a lot could happen based on that. I think that's the final option Trump would have. The question is, would he use it? It'd be pretty serious if he did. Laksana Skoll, I appreciate the donation. Thank you. Thank you for good information. Oh, wow. Thomas Anderson, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Catalia Fordis, I appreciate it. Thank you. This is from Michael Lewis. I appreciate it. Good day, USA, from Queensland, Australia. We're watching closely. Kind regards, little brother. Stay strong. I appreciate it. Thank you. This is from Miss Chavez. Josh, what is the strategy with Sidney Powell being removed? Why is Trump bringing our troops home? I feel like this is the calm before the storm. Your thoughts? There's some interesting stuff going on right now. And, the funny thing is, of course, if you try to jump to conclusions, they call you conspiracy theorist. But, let's just look at these surface facts, okay? Let's look at the surface facts. It is true Trump brings the troop homes. There were reports, for example, of this raid, this U.S. military raid on these, vote servers in Germany. Sidney Powell was talking about it. The people on the Trump team were talking about it. Now, military involved with this. Sidney Powell allegedly being, a military lawyer. Trump fires Mark Espers, the head of the Department of Defense, at a time when you would not think a president would do something so drastic if he's, in the process of transitioning out of office, unless he does it in a rage or something like that. And, fair enough. Maybe the left, they think Trump is, volatile. Maybe they think that's excusable. He puts into place a new acting defense secretary. One of the first things he does, you know what that was? He made it so that special forces answers directly to him. Why would he do that? right? Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions here, but something is happening. I would assume it does seem something is happening. Maybe it's for security. Maybe it's for the fact that Trump passed this 2018 national security, this 2018 executive order declaring a national emergency around voter fraud. What powers does a national emergency give you? Would that give Trump, for example, control over the Marines if he chose to use them? Maybe. Again, we'll have to see what happens. I think this is all speculation at this point, but there's some weird stuff going on. I think it's fair to say there's some real weird stuff going on. And I think we can say that pretty accurately. Let's see. This is from Curious Q&A. Thank you for the donation. Josh equals CCP agent. All the channel and donors ensured he is aligned with CCP. Thank you for the awesome work, Josh and teams. Your great coverage in the truth. Yeah, I'd be one of the worst CCP agents ever. I appreciate it though. Thank you. All right, this is from Anha Habib again. Really, thank you for the donation. Says the last straw would be crossing the Rubicon via invoking the Insurrection Act and then calling on the militia, i.e., all citizen men aged 18 to 45 years old. There's some interesting stuff going on. I get a lot of interesting information, and of course, I don't want to say things I can't prove, and I don't want to jump to conclusions on things. I can say that Trump has a lot of cards up his sleeve. Now, of course, we're all paying attention to the elections right now. Another big thing to mention is the John Durham case. That really, there were a lot of actions taken by the left, by the Clinton administration, by the Democratic National Committee, and again, trying to create scandal after scandal after scandal to make it so that Trump couldn't do his job essentially for the past 4 years. They did a lot of things like that. The Trump-Russia investigation, the impeachment hoax, is Trump mentally deranged? Is his IQ too low? Is he mentally stable? The false rape accusations, on and on and on and on and on. Scandal after scandal after scandal, falsehood after falsehood after falsehood, debunked one after the next. There's a few different points to this. Let me go a little into how this works. When you're dealing with disinformation, right? In other words, now disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda are actually different. And let me explain a bit of this. Now, what is propaganda? It's basically stories or imagery meant to make you have an emotional reaction tied to an issue. For example, not propaganda isn't necessarily false. It can be propaganda posters for wartime saying, fight for Uncle Sam, join the militia, or, so on, things like that. It could be something to make you feel patriotic, something to make you feel angry, something to make you feel supportive, so on. An image or statement to invoke an emotional reaction tied to a political issue or another thing. The propaganda is pretty common. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be, of course, when it's manipulative. That's propaganda. What is misinformation? Misinformation is the direct statement of falsehoods. And misinformation has its strategic uses. Misinformation, when it comes to these darker groups. Misinformation can be used, for example, to sow discord among a, anti-government movement or a movement deemed as a threat to an institution, to make people within that movement turn against each other. Some might believe it, some might, support it, some might be against it. It's to disseminate confusion and chaos within a system. That's what misinformation is for. Disinformation is not necessarily false. Disinformation is altering the footnotes through which you interpret something. Disinformation is, for example, fake events. For example, the Chinese Communist Party does this a lot, where for example, during the 2018 Beijing Olympics, there were photos, for example, of Chinese military police holding the robes of Tibetan monks so they could go and protest and carry out violence wearing the robes of Tibetan monks, so that people in the international community would think the Tibetan monks were causing violence. That would be disinformation. The Chinese Communist Party, to frame Falun Gong, did a fake self-immolation where they had people set themselves on fire. It was exposed to be fake. There was a documentary called False Fire on that was very good. Won an award, actually. That was disinformation. The creation of false events in order to frame an emotional reaction against a group, to turn people against something, to make them feel a certain way. Disinformation can also be altering the footnotes of arguments. So, for example, you tell 1,000 lies, and then you use those lies as the footnote in a broader story on just one single point. And for that one single point, it's a grain of falsehood with 99% truth. But the analysis, the angle is based on that one point. Now, if you wanted to discredit that whole picture they created, you would have to expose 1,000 lies, because they'd be like, oh, well, what about this? What about this? You're a conspiracy theorist. You would have to expose 1,000 lies to discredit the entire picture they had formed. Now, when they've gone after Trump, they've used all these. They've told lie after lie after lie after lie. They've done this time and time and time again. They get exposed many times, but the big media don't typically really go back and clarify how they got things wrong. They typically just move to a new scandal. There's a few results of things like that. One is that people, of course, are misled, but two, on a deeper level, you create emotional memory for people. And this is like a Pavlov's dog type theory. This is classic communist brainwashing 101. When Vladimir Lenin in the Soviet Union was, of course, trying to control the population soon after taking power, they did these experiments with Pavlov, this Dr. Pavlov. And I'm sure you all know the story. They got these dogs and they would feed the dog food and they'd ring a bell. The dog would get food. The dog would salivate. Eventually, they found that if you would just ring the bell, the dog will salivate without the food, meaning the dog had created an emotional reaction, a natural reaction to a stimuli. Now, you can do that just like any form of brainwashing. One of the important points that's missed with that study is that Lenin himself had gone there, and Pavlov himself said Lenin wanted to control people. He wanted to brainwash people like dogs. He wanted to train people like dogs. Now, what's the context of this? Why am I telling you this? It's because this is how disinformation works. This is how the big media work. They will lead you through emotional journeys. They'll lead you through emotional journeys, telling sob stories tied to a political issue, telling you about, this, new journalism type writing where they write these narrative-based stories, tying together, claims that from anonymous sources, painting false pictures, leading you through this emotional journey. When you read these stories, you'll go through an emotional journey with them, and you will develop an emotional memory, meaning that your emotion becomes a symbol tied to a political issue, meaning that your reaction is tied to a stimuli. And so when that stimuli is brought back up, in this case, a political topic, Trump, for example, you'll react in this, kind of unconscious way. You'll have this unconscious emotional reaction, and people may not know why they feel that way. They may not know why they hate Trump. They may not know why they like something or dislike something. It's because they've developed this unconscious reaction based again on stimuli, based again on the same concept, this brainwashing technique. Now, what's interesting is going back to this question you asked. And so, it's kind of a long tangent on it, but hear me out. What's interesting is that you have, now looking at legal cases, right? Looking at what's illegal in this country, obstruction of justice is a crime, right? You have obstructed one of the main pillars of the U.S. government, the judicial branch. If you obstruct the judicial branch, that is a crime. If you obstruct Congress, the legislative branch, that is a crime. Now, if you obstruct the executive branch, the presidential office, is that a crime? Right? It's never been done before. There's never been a case on that. Could Trump argue, though, that based on this whole picture, could he argue that there's obstruction of the executive branch? based on, again, the fact that they used all these scandals, falsehoods one after the next, lies upon lies, disproven lies. Could he argue that this is obstruction of the executive branch and argue that that should be a crime? It's never been done before. But that would be something very, very interesting to watch. Because again, obstruction of the other two, again, there's three branches of government. Obstruction to the other two are crimes. Would it be a crime to obstruct the third? There's never been a precedent on that. But John Durham's case could constitute a case based on that. It's something very interesting to think about, right? All right, this is from Castaway. Appreciate the donation. Can your associates do a report showing mainstream media corporate board members' ties to other businesses? It'd be great to make it apparent to Dems how biased, from a fiscal standpoint, MSM is. Yeah, I mean, this is the interesting part with all this. Your average far leftist, a lot of times the reason even Democrats, a lot of the reasons sometimes why they dislike Republicans is they see Republicans as being the big business class, the dirty money class, the guys just out for, big corporate interests. Which big corporations are behind the media? Would these same people be against those big corporations? Which big corporations are behind the social media? Are these the millionaires and billionaires, again, we're talking about? Which big corporations are tied to all these deals with China that have turned against Trump? Because, again, he's impacted a lot of their financial interests in China. Which big businesses in the banking industry have ties like this? What are their corporate interests here? What are the big business interests in big pharma? Trump's hitting that. What are the big interests, for example, when you get into the school systems, when you have federal loans basically working as the basis for unaffordable schooling, where it's this artificially pumped up system. All these big institutions, while these same institutions are claiming to be against greed and big corporate interests, represent greed and big corporate interests. How is it that people don't wrap their minds around that, right? One of the big ironies you have is that when people who say they want socialism, they often think it's about getting rid of greed or getting rid of big corporate powers and so on. Let's be clear. Socialism does not and has never gotten rid of those systems. The only difference is they're brought under government control. That's the only difference. Can we name a single socialist government in the history of the last 100 years since Lenin's Bolshevik Revolution? Can we name a single one that got rid of the big businesses that existed in the country? No, they brought them under state control. Even Pol Pot in the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, where you had an agrarian society. Even Pol Pot seized through government the only institution they had, which was the farms. Look, for example, what happened to the Soviet Union. Did they get rid of the factories? No, they brought them under state control. Look at what happened with Hitler. Again, National Socialism, the marriage of fascism, the marriage of the corporate and socialist state. It didn't get rid of any of these things. Now, what it does do, however, is get rid of the individual's ability to start their own business, to engage on their own in these types of things. It eliminates the middle, not the top. And it's ironic that a lot of these same organizations pushing for these types of things, the ones advocating for policies that really create socialism, oftentimes represent the very thing that people who support these ideas think they hate. Again, why do all the big businesses and big billionaires, why do so many of them support these? Why is that? It's because if this passes, they're already corporate entities, meaning they're owned by boards of directors, meaning that those boards of directors keep their positions and keep their power. The only difference being that the ability for people to compete with them is eliminated, meaning that they will get state subsidies, meaning that moves that would result in failure are state subsidized, meaning that they get what China would call their iron rice bowls. They will never have to worry about going out of business or failing because they become married to the state. And it's one of the biggest loopholes, I think, in the logic that oftentimes people use to believe that going for these systems is going to get rid of the things that they believe they oppose, when in reality, it subsidizes them. Let's see here. All right, I'm scrolling through the chats. Really appreciate the donations, everybody. I think I have trouble keeping track because they disappear on me, but really appreciate it. Gordon Smith, thank you. This is from Renee Medina, thank you. All of you, really appreciate it. This is from Anhaf Habib. Could appeal to 80 million plus patriots that there is a foreign conspiracy to strip them of their vote, which is a subset of the First Amendment, thus invoking the Insurrection Act. Millions would flock to him. Maybe true. Hopefully not that way. This is from Laura Moore. Is that the definition of fascism? You know, a lot of people misinterpret fascism, even fascists misinterpret it. It was socialism. It was you had many different interpretations of socialism, none of which recognized the other one as being socialist. You had Christian socialism, military socialism. You had the syndicalists. You had the Owenites, the farm-based socialism. You had the Bolsheviks. You had Mussolini's fascism. You had Hitler's Nazism. These were all different brands of socialism. The only good book I've read that really breaks down the differences is Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. I often talk about it on this show, and I don't know where it is. Here we go. The only book I know of that really breaks it down well, Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. Very good book. If you want a breakdown of the differences between the nuances in these systems, this is a good one. Also, F.A. Hayek in Road to Serfdom goes over this as well, as does Richard Pipes, Russia under the Bolshevik Revolution. He does a good job as well on this. Anyways, quite a few books go into this. You want to actually, if those of you on YouTube who want something good, do a Google search or a YouTube search for Planned Chaos. There's a 3-hour audio book. It's a chapter from one of Ludwig von Mises's books on this, and it breaks it down very well. It's called Planned Chaos, and there's an audio book. There's a Stoic channel on YouTube. The guy did a really good recording of it. I highly recommend it if you're interested in that. Let me go through the questions. Philip Rodriguez, we're not looking too good. Need something bigly. Yeah, I think have patience. I do think again the ball hasn't really dropped from the Trump legal team. Right now, what we're hearing a lot about are the lawsuits along the periphery. You're not really hearing lawsuits along the main track. And again, what's going to happen? It's going to have to go to the Supreme Court, inevitably. And what does that mean in the meantime? As it goes to the Supreme Court? It means that as it goes to the Supreme Court, you're going to see local courts probably throw it out. And as Trump's team has specified in some of the statements that they've made on this, they prefer they get thrown out. They prefer they get immediately rejected. And why is that? Because it speeds up the process of it going to the Supreme Court, which it inevitably has to do. The problem is also as it gets dragged out, the longer it's dragged out for, the more you're going to have to deal with the fact that Biden is declaring that he's already the winner of the election. And he's already acting like he's the president. Meaning that, and the media and social media, they're all playing along with it, right? It's a very bizarre charade you're watching right now. This is from, let's see here, JU. How about raw data seized from Dominion server? I appreciate the donation. We'll have to see with that. The Trump legal team, or I think it was Sidney Powell, did say that they had gotten a hold of the algorithm used to alter the votes. It was either Powell or Giuliani. I get them mixed up sometimes in terms of what they've been saying. But Trump's team, they allegedly do have the algorithm used to manipulate votes. Powell herself has said that they were able to seize servers allegedly in Germany from one of these companies. We'll have to see what they actually get out of the servers themselves. There's nothing really public on it yet. We'll have to see. This is from Interesting CR. I appreciate the donation. Thank you. Let's see here. This is from Marythel Benquil. To the trolls joining these exchange of views, you know what we are standing for. Repent your evil ways and join the bandwagon for truth and justice. Yeah, you'll always get trolls and whatever, right? There are such things as paid trolls too. Chinese Communist Party has, and the whole 50-cent army issue. There's a lot of them. If you get into dirty politics in Washington, there's whole businesses run around this stuff. Where, for example, they'll have companies and they'll have smartphones hooked up into a big system, and they'll generate each of them, for example, they'll have a different account tied to them: Twitter account, Facebook account, Instagram account, whatever you want to use, and they'll have AI systems to send minor alterations in direct messages and stuff. There's also direct paid trolls. There's businesses around this stuff. Frankly, I take internet trolls with a grain of salt. It's business. There's businesses for this stuff. You also get to what you call black PR, not a racist, not a race thing, but black PR. There's public relations to promote your business. There's black PR to go after your competitors. There's a lot of companies that do this. You get into dirty politics, they do this stuff. Take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? 9 times out of 10, the real aggressive trolls are doing this either because they're part of this thing, or because, for example, you tweet negative comments on Trump's Twitter account, and you get the high enough thing, it directs traffic to your business, right? People use this stuff, right? There's a way to do these things, and there's a lot of nonsense out there. Let's put it that way. I'll just do one more. I'll do one more question, and then I'll wrap it up because it's already gone on an hour. Appreciate the donations, everyone. Fart sausage, great username. If we know it was stolen, we know they will destroy the republic. Is it justified to physically fight? I would recommend against using physical violence. Mainly because, first off, I don't think it's going to solve anything, but also because I think they want that from us. I think they want that, to be honest. I think they want people fighting on the streets, because if they control the narrative, if they control the outlets of information, they control the narrative, and they can misrepresent information and do whatever they want with it. I think they use these things strategically. I wouldn't go with it. This is from Jamie Vick. You don't have to answer this. Do the super chats go directly to you or to the Epoch Times? This is an Epoch Times channel, so it's mixed, of course. It's mixed. This is from Maximoon707. Appreciate the donation. Let me do one question. I'll wrap it up. I can go on all night easily. This is from Hesky10600. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Would you have virtual discussions with the audiences on Discord? My recommended films about the totalitarian dystopia: Demolition Man, great movie; Idiocracy, Escape from New York, and Snowpiercer. Would I do something on Discord? I've never done it before. I'd consider it. I've never done it before. I'd have to look into it. Let me answer one more question, and then we'll call it a night. This is from Rio Leone. When so much powerful people and companies are implicated in this, how is it that they will get caught? They surely get counterattacks that they can buy. The push of the big reset is hard to break. Here's what I think. Based on the fraud taking place right now, something that will have a domino effect around the world. This will not just be, if fraud is exposed in the US elections, if, for example, Dominion and Smartmatic and the Sequoia systems are exposed to have issues with them, if it's taken to US courts and the American court system determines that fraud took place within these systems, this will have a domino effect around the world. This will have a domino effect through Latin America. This will have a domino effect through Europe. This will affect South Korea. This will affect any country in the world that has used these exact same systems. This will have a rippling effect on every corrupt government that has come to power through these exact same systems. This is not just a US issue. This is an international issue. And frankly, every person who's set to lose in this is going to be fighting life and death. That's what it is for them. I think with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google, they risk losing their Section 230 protections. If Trump gets back into office, he's going to remove their Section 230 protections almost without a doubt, meaning they can get sued for what users post on their sites, meaning they can no longer censor people, and meaning that they can get sued if someone puts up some illegal content. It's going to be the end of them. The amount of lawsuits that could be filed against these people would be endless. This is life or death for these big tech companies. If now that the big media has pulled out all the stops to lie about these things, to tell these lies one after the next, if Trump has the ability, for example, to go after people with lawsuits, again, for trying to steal an election, he has quite a few options on the table, including this 2018 executive order on election fraud, which could go after disinformation like they've been publishing, to declare Biden the winner and to say, if you say otherwise, you're a conspiracy theorist, and to work with the big social media to censor you, again, if you try to say otherwise. It's a coup. That's what is a coup, right? This is a coup launched through ideological warfare, essentially. Trump could argue that. They have a lot to lose. Now, then you get into the political system. What happens if, for example, people directly involved in the Biden campaign, with the DNC, with these different groups, Sidney Powell even alleged some Republicans involved with it? What happens if all the mechanisms of rigging votes are exposed and all the power players within all these local campaigns are exposed? What will the effect be? How many people could go to prison? Remember that even in the last election, you had several hundred people go to, get charged for voter fraud of different types. There was not exposed a broader conspiracy because no investigation into a broader conspiracy seemed to have been done. But again, what would happen if this is exposed? The way the legal challenges are going would look into all these different facets. The way the legal challenges are going would look into all these things. If things, for example, turn out that fraud took place and there was coordination and cooperation, and this was something bigger than just, random people acting on their ideological bias and altering things. If this is something broader, which does seem to be the basis of the accusations, this could have massive, massive ramifications in the US and around the world. And a lot of the most powerful people and companies are set to lose, bigly. And so interesting times we're in. Anyways, let us see how it unfolds. Folks, this week I'm going to be traveling again for some reporting. I'll try to do the live Q&As. At the very least, I'm going to be publishing interviews. I'll try to do live Q&As same time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. That is with the exception of if I'm unable to find an internet connection or if I'm on the road somewhere and I can't do it. But we'll keep you updated. Keep an eye out for our alerts if you get them, and get some good stuff in the works. Yeah. Anyways, as always, really appreciate all of you. I always enjoy doing these lives. And again, going to be broadcasting this whole week, again, at the very least, interviews, and I'm going to be trying to keep trying to do the live Q&As throughout the week as well. Some days it's not going to be possible just because of my kind of wild schedule this coming week, but I'm going to make an effort to. So again, keep an eye out for alerts, and I'm going to have to play it by ear a little bit. And I had to take my I have to ask your forgiveness for not being able to be more organized with it. It's just a few things are up in the air still. Anyways, folks, I really appreciate the support. Always enjoy doing these. You're all great. That said, as always, stay informed, stay free. Thank you.